Okay. Hello.
Hello.
I think we'll wait a minute for more people to join.
Sounds good.
If they will. Um, my name is Lowell Dillon. I am the son of Stacy Dillon, the co-founder of Connecting to Cure Crohn's and Colitis, and we are doing this Instagram Live right now. As you can see, I'm here interviewing Alison McGauley, who wrote the children's book Kenzie's Little Tree. This is Allison. Hello, Allison. Please wave and introduce yourself further.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm a teacher and the author of Kenzie's Little Tree, as Lowell mentioned. Also a mom of two girls. I have ulcerative colitis that was diagnosed in 2008, as well as ankylosing spondylitis, which is inflammatory arthritis that affects the spine. And this is my debut picture book, illustrated by Emily Leduc and published by the amazing crew at Orca Book Publishers. In the story, Kenzie and her family plant a fragile tree in their yard one summer day, and she promises to keep it safe. Only when fall and winter weather flare, along with mom's chronic illness, Kenzie worries that her promise will be broken. Kenzie's little tree reminds us that though the world is constantly changing and oftentimes difficult, we can be bold and strong, just like the little tree. And I just wanted to share one spread with everyone tonight. A little tricky to read on here, but give it a go. In Kenzie's family, Saturdays are for adventures, and today's is planting. Mom and Dad choose bright blossoms at the garden store. Kenzie skips through a maze of trees. Her sister Lexi follows. A little tree catches Kenzie's eye. It stands a bit crooked, and some of its leaves are brown. But its branches are open, like Mom's arms waiting for hugs. I want this one, Kenzie says.
I read the book. I very much enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It's very nature, and the illustrations really take you into the world of this little child Kenzie who has to learn about a parent who is sick, who is something that relates to your life very directly. Yeah, I guess I wanted to start with just how you decided to write a book,
Definitely.
since this is your first.
Well, as I mentioned, I have two daughters. So they were 4 and 7 when I was suddenly hospitalized in a different city. And then there's been a long time. So my whole life, or not my whole life, their whole lives, I've been sick. So there's been lots of times when my girls have wanted to do activities like go sledding or eat certain foods at celebrations or whatnot. And when I'm in a flare of either my IBD or my arthritis, it's made them sad when I can't do these things. So all of that's been hard along with acute instances like the hospital. So I wrote Kenzie's Little Tree for my girls and all children who are impacted by illness or disability so that they can feel seen and represented, and to remind them that though life can be tough, they are strong. And after my time in the hospital, I learned about the importance of talking with kids about their experiences, thoughts, and feelings. And that was another huge reason why I wrote the book, because I hope that reading Kenzie's Little Tree will be a way for families to start conversations.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting in the book how it's written from the perspective of Kenzie, the little girl, and you yourself have chronic illness, and you've seen your own children struggle with how to respond in a normal way to that, being very young, not understanding all of it. I I found it interesting, just the sort of the way, how much detail it goes into in terms of how much Kenzie's being told and what is going on in her mind about what her mom is going through and all of that. So I guess I just wanted to ask, like, how that was sort of informed by um, your daughter's experience, or did you talk to your daughter about it, or
Right.
yeah, just more about that.
Yeah, it was definitely heavily influenced by my own experiences and those of my girls. When I first set out to write the book, actually, I wasn't sure how I would format it. I had this idea, but I didn't know how to put it down. So, not knowing where to start, I actually interviewed both of my daughters about their thoughts and memories about just in general, but also about my lengthy hospital stay. So, I wanted whatever I wrote to be authentic to a child experience. They remembered and shared quite a bit with me. And here's a couple of their comments I just wanted to share with you. One of them said, "It felt scary. I didn't know if you would have to stay there for a month or a year." So it kind of showed me, like, with a young child, they don't really have any perception of time.
Right.
So in their minds, like, oh, I was gone for 10 days, but that, probably felt
Yeah.
like weeks and weeks. And the other one said, "I played alone in my room. Then I could forget that you were gone." And while I was away, my mom, who was here with them, she did mention that my younger one just wanted to play alone, even though my mom offered to play with her. And I think, that one was really heartbreaking. But when she told me that, then I realized, like, why she was doing that, because it was just easier for her to forget that I was gone that way. So I
Hmm. Yeah.
used all those, what they told me, and just remembering past experiences to be inspired to write the book,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. That is really, really interesting. That you decided to do that. And yeah. Um, uh, okay. And then I wanted to ask you, because it's a family book. It's a children's book, but it's informative for families and families dealing with chronic illness. And I've had Crohn's disease since I was two. My mom and my whole family has been very involved in my healthcare my
Hmm.
whole life, and it really can take over your whole life. And there's a lot of caregivers and things that people don't see a lot, that people don't talk about a lot. And it takes up a lot of time and energy for a family to deal with one person who has a chronic illness, and it's not talked about so much. So yeah, I guess I wanted to ask why you decided to talk about the family perspective of it, and why do you think that's sort of important to talk about?
Right. Well, first off, like, when after I returned home from the hospital, like I was talking about, we didn't talk about it that much at first because we thought it would be easier for the girls to forget that way. But then they were very anxious whenever I'd go out, thinking, like, "Are you coming back? Are you going to go to the hospital again?" And this went on for a while. Then we talked to a family therapist, and we learned about how repeatedly talking about an incident or an event could help with kids to process their feelings. So we did, and we did find that that helped them a lot. And even now, sometimes reflect back on it. And so I learned from that experience that it was helpful for writing the book, just in terms of knowing about having conversations about it. So I did write a family discussion guide to go with the book. And in terms of the family impact as well, like, once you live with chronic illness, you realize how much it impacts the entire family, like you were saying. Like, even before I had kids, it was just my husband and I, he was still impacted by my restrictive meals. Because at first I tried to just eat like specific diets.
Mhm.
And so he wasn't really a big fan of that time period. But then there's certain times that chronic illness symptoms can really take over, as you know, and impact a lot of your life, like needing to take time off work, eating a restrictive diet, limiting physical activities, canceling vacations or special events. And this can be really tough, especially for kids, right, who have a harder time being flexible than adults. So I think it's really important for people to see this because they may not be aware of these kind of things if their family hasn't lived through this reality. So I wanted the book to resonate with families who have chronic illness, but also to be like a window for other families to see through who don't know about the challenges that we face.
Yeah, right. And I also think it's important for people and families who, I mean, that's very well said in terms of the families who, I think it portrays the family chronic illness dynamic well. And I think someone who would read it, who maybe has a family member with chronic illness, would just sort of understand um, just a bit more about how it does really impact everything. And like you said, all these different aspects of lives. And obviously for children, it's harder to understand, and harder to be flexible, which is also interesting.
Yeah, like,
I
for you, you were two when you were sick. So, I mean, you had to be flexible with your own, right, with your own health. And that
Yeah,
must have been, that's
it's
probably all
it's
you ever
different. It's
remember. But that's really tough
Yeah,
for sure.
it's funny to think about, if you because I mean, I went through a phase where I canceled all the plans I ever had for I had a lot of anxiety about making plans and canceling plans and stuff.
Right.
Having a parent with a chronic illness and you're a kid, it's a weird thing for me to think about because yeah, it's like a kid would be is just like, high energy, let's do this, kid activities.
Right.
And
Yeah, they want you
those
to, yeah,
take
they
up a
want you
lot
to
of
do all those.
energy.
Yeah.
You need a lot of energy for that. And then explaining that you don't have all the energy in the world, I bet is something to navigate. But yeah,
Yes, and then for me as well with the arthritis, there's also sometimes like I mentioned the sledding. Like if I just had IBD,
mhm.
I could probably do that. But then he's like, I have
Yeah,
to be really careful with my back. So then it's like, well, that's off the table plus the
right,
food. So it's yeah,
right.
depending on,
Different areas
the
of
flair. Yeah, for sure.
right. Okay, cool. I wanted to mention if anyone has any questions, who's here live, please put them in the chat. I would be able to take one or two of them. Let me go back to. Okay, I wanted to ask about. So in the book, Kenzie has this tree that she takes care of,
Hmm.
and time passes, the seasons pass, and she takes care of this tree. While her mom is in the hospital, she takes care of the tree. Um, it's a metaphor. Can you talk about the metaphor, please?
Definitely. So, as I mentioned when I first started, I wasn't sure sort of how I would format the book. So, after drafting a few early versions, I decided that it was going to be a narrative, which it is now. And I decided that I could soften the heavy topic of chronic illness by using a metaphor. So, I wanted it to be a book that was relatable to kids and had a storyline. And knowing the ever changing nature of chronic illness, I wanted to make a comparison with something transient and immediately thought of the natural world. We actually live right across from a bunch of trails, so we're often out on the trails, and both of my kids love nature. So for us too, that was just a really good connection. So from there, I narrowed it down to a tree, particularly one that changes each season. So then I just started doing some research to find, what tree would be best, and I found the prairie fire flower and crabapple tree. And I'm a huge blossom fan, so I knew right away, like, yes, this is exactly what I want to use. It's so beautiful in the spring. And this picture behind me is actually a prairie fire flower and crabapple tree because I just think they're so beautiful. So then I thought about ways that the tree and mum were similar and how I could convey this to readers through word choice and literary devices. So that's how all that came into play.
Well, very cool. Yeah, no, just the whole the the love of nature really shines throughout the book, I would say.
Yeah, was
Um,
really lucky because I didn't have any say. So when
mhm.
you do a picture book, typically you don't get to meet with the illustrator or have any say into the
Okay.
illustrations. But so I'm really thrilled with Emily Leduc's art and just actually in my family, my one daughter loves monarch butterflies, and we typically raise butterflies in the summer and then release them. And so we were just so happy that there was a monarch on the cover
Uh,
and just all the nature aspects are so beautiful.
yeah, very cool. Very cool. Okay. Got a question from Peter there
Okay.
about you've talked about being a parent, but how does your experience as a teacher inform your writing? Good
It's a good
question.
question.
It is a good question.
Well, I taught, so I'm a special education teacher now, but I taught grade one and grade three for quite a few years. And actually, I taught a lot of writing stories and even some of the lessons that I taught, like using alliteration, like all the poetic devices. So some of that stuff even applies. And also when I was teaching grade three, I did a lot on um, teaching how to start a book, what makes a good beginning, and that's really something to keep in mind a lot when you're writing a picture book for young kids because you really want an opening that's going to get their attention. Um, so yeah, I'd say that a lot. And also just so in the book, there's a lot of tie-ins, and I actually made a teacher's guide that goes with the book because there's a lot of science tie-ins. So as I said, I taught grade one, and in the grade one curriculum, there's always a big unit about seasonal changes, how do animals change each season, what sort of things do humans do each season? And I tried to really weave that into the book. So there's a lot of connections that teachers can make with science. There's also changes in plants each season. So there's plants units. So when I was drafting it, I actually looked through the curriculum and I tried to make the most of the connections that I could, knowing that this could be really helpful for teachers as well.
Cool. Yeah. no, it's very, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of uh, connecting different things coming in and learning on a few different levels, I think, going on, which is cool. Um, okay, cool. Oh, this is a good question from Caitlin. This book would be a perfect classroom book. Any advice for a teacher with an IBD? Good question. Um,
So in
well, you're,
terms of telling the students
I
about
guess,
it, or
in terms of, no, just you're a teacher and you have IBD.
right?
Uh, I don't know. Any advice for, yeah, dealing with, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I've worked with
Well,
kids.
one good
Um,
thing,
you don't have
I
to go that
mean,
into it,
yeah.
but yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, a couple things. So one thing is I still often mask at school because I'm on biologics, so I'm immune compromised. And so sometimes like kids will wonder like why,
Yeah,
pandemic's over, they
yeah.
say, like why are you still masking? But my students are used to it now. But so one thing is I just tell them, like I do have some like a disease. Sometimes I just say like a belly disease, and
Hmm.
I'm on medication that I can get sick more easily.
Hmm.
So I do try to be like fairly open with them, but not, obviously I don't go into detail, but I just say that I can get sick more easily and I don't want to catch any colds or anything.
Hmm.
And in terms of talking to them about it, I mean, this would be a great book. There's, lots of books. I would read books to kids because that's what I feel like kids really, even adults and kids relate to stories so well. Um, yeah,
Cool.
just letting them ask questions because kids are very curious and they like to, as I said before, they like to have repeated conversations. So sometimes, like even with my own kids, like you think, well, we've already talked about this, but they just crave to have repeated conversations. So just letting them ask questions, even if you've already covered that, I
That's a
think is
good
really
tip.
important.
Yeah. No, that was a great answer, actually. That. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Allison. Do you want to tell people where to buy your book so they can send you money for it?
Definitely. So thanks so much for having me and chatting about Kenzie's Little Tree. So you can find Kenzie's Little Tree anywhere that you buy books. Buying locally from independent bookstores is best, and it's also available online. If you head to my website, which is alisonmcgauley.com, you can find links to order the books. You can also find links for the family discussion guide that I mentioned, a teacher guide that I wrote that connects to curriculum expectations, and also coloring pages that are created by the illustrator Emily Leduc.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Allison, for doing
Awesome.
this.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
yeah,
It was
appreciate it.
great to chat with you and reach out to the
Yeah,
community.
thank you, everyone, for watching. And yeah, see you next time.
Okay, have a good night.
All right,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.